Hello, and in this slideshow, we will be talking about evidence of the flood, an analysis of course, the evidence of the flood. This is typically physical evidence, but also cultural evidence and various sorts that we have. So, for the biggest argument, there's the Durupinar Formation. The Durupinar Formation matches the dimensions of the arc: 300 cubits long, approximately 510 feet, 50 cubits wide, approximately 85 feet, and 30 cubits high, approximately 51 feet. It is also shaped similar to that of the arc. Scans indicate hidden structures within the formation, hidden chambers and a rib cage of that of a boat, likely being the inside of the arc. Scans and tests also show high amounts of elements such as potassium and carbon, which typically indicates large amounts of rotting wood. Now, all of this, obviously off a slideshow and off word, it's either going to sound super convincing or not convincing at all. And there have been there has been various research studies for the Durupinar Formation. I've had an atheist or so tell me that, oh, there's even Christian studies where they dismiss it as just a rock formation. But at the same time, the atheist completely failed to give me actual sources, not even a single name pertaining to that. And obviously, I would expect a secular-made response, but if they're going to go to the extent of Christian-made responses, saying that it is just a rock formation, then yes, I do expect names and citations. Location of the Durupinar Formation. The formation was found buried right next to Mount Ararat, exactly where the scripture states the ark rested, and specifically for chapter 8, verse 4, and on the 17th day of the 17th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Findings that support Durupinar's the Ark, Part 1. Giant anchor stones were found near Mount Ararat in the Durupinar Formation. These were so massive that no normal boat could use these, but rather one of the proportions of the ark. They have 8 names carved on them, and they currently appear to have multitudes of crosses carved on them, carved by later Christians. These are often debated to be entirely carved by Christians and perhaps even Jewish people, but the holes and shapes say somewhat otherwise. If these are dated pre-Mesopotamia ever, I would consider that these are a nail in the coffin for skeptics. I'm not going to immediately say, oh hey, big stones, therefore, and some of them also have holes in them and look like way stones or anchor stones for a huge boat. But obviously, if these have been specifically designated near the ark and have distinct shapes, sizes, and even things that could dignify them as anchor stones, then it is inside the realm of probability that they could be the anchor stone to the ark. This is not an immediate saying that, oh, these are definitely the anchor stones, but I think they're definitely something to consider. And here's the second finding that supports Durupinar's the ark. As I stated previously, they have found high quantities of things like carbon and potassium, as well as findings of what seems to be petrified wood. They also find remnants of petrified iron and higher amounts of iron particles, which is unusual for a structure like this formation. Compared to Part 1, this isn't as good, but still considered decent evidence, because basically this one adds on to the first slide about the Durupinar Formation as a whole. Was this Noah's? The Göbekli Tepe is sometimes debated to belonging to Noah. It's near Mesopotamia, but is currently dated to be about 12,000 or more years old, which somewhat predates Mesopotamia. It has carvings of animals and has what appears to be enclosures for animals. This is a few hundred miles from the Durupinar site. While still being relatively close to it, I don't consider this absolute solid evidence, but it's plausible to a degree. And I'm mainly listing this because I know that I've heard somewhere that near the Durupinar Formation they found an altar and pens, and I could be confusing the specific site with the Göbekli Tepe, and if I am, please feel free to notify me in the comments about names for the specific site, etc. I'm not claiming that this is Noah's, this is just based off of what I could find. Here's an actual good argument that I like. Coincidence or history? One story repeated by different religions all around the world, even older than early Judaism, is the flood story. You can find stories from Native Americans, Aztecs, and Incas, Nords, early Hindus, early Japanese, the Greeks, the Mesopotamians, and more. People have made arguments that they're copies, but almost none of these civilizations are ever recorded interacting, nor would they have the chance to interact. How is it that worldwide all beliefs mention a great flood as divine punishment, the restart of humanity, and often a big ark? And you'd be surprised how many narratives specifically pertain to that in each of these religions. Now, I'm not claiming that, oh, it's told pretty much all over the world, therefore it's verifiably true, but it is something to consider. If there are stories that involve a giant flood as divine punishment, a giant ark, the restart of humanity, like the last few people, and even animals boarding the ark, or the giant boat in all these various stories, then clearly this is something to consider. A much lesser case, fish in the air. An often repeated case I hear is of fish and marine life fossils being found on top of mountains. While these are interesting, these are often dated to hundreds of millions of years ago, so I would not consider these evidence. If we found much younger versions of these, that would be impressive and considered evidence. Sadly, though, I do not consider this incredibly plausible evidence of the flood. So in this case, I would side with most secular people, unless we could find specific examples of fish and marine life fossils that are petrified into stone and are like much less than a million years old, then maybe I would side with those. But for the most of the cases, I would side with secular people as, well, many of these can often be explained as being life from when the earth was covered with mostly water and then it dried up, and obviously the tectonic plates caused the land to rise. Large ancient floods in the Middle East/Mediterranean area. There are archaeological records of great floods in places like the Mediterranean Middle East, where the majority of the Bible takes place. Some of these do date back to a very long time ago, some before humans were even around. Large ancient floods are frequently documented. Whether or not what evidence of a global scale flood is accurate is up to further research. I do not deem this entirely conclusive evidence until further research and more of a pinpoint date of the flood to determine. So in this case, I use specifically the Middle East/Mediterranean area because, to put it simply, if the Bible takes place in the majority of that great area, I would kind of expect the flood to cover the majority of those areas, as those were where multiple early people were, as well as considering it wasn't too far off from Europe and Africa, but also extending all the way to Asia and the Americas. I do not know whether to accept if the flood covered absolutely everything in the world, like everything was covered in water, or whether just from Noah's point of view, pretty much everything was covered in water, but around some parts of the world, they weren't as flooded. I cannot explicitly say, and I often have mixed views. And here's a tier list of evidence. In the S tier, I have the entire information of all the Duripanar formation, the location, dimensions, hidden structure scans, elements found in and on the formation, all of those things. For the A tier, I have the flood story told throughout the world. For the B tier, I have the anchor stones, as they could probably use a bit better evidence. For C tier, I have the Gobekli Tepe, because again, unless I'm mixing it up with another location, it seems plausible for Noah to have kept a bunch of animals there. Perhaps they had an altar there, but again, I could be mixing this up with another location. And that there is a different location close to the Duripanar site, more so much closer to the Duripanar site, that had an altar and animal carvings and what appeared to be pens for the animals. And for D tier, I have large ancient floods that are documented archaeologically and marine fossils on the tops of mountains, as those can be easily explained scientifically. So, thank you for listening. And God bless to all my viewers. And again, it's the same thing for the evidence of the Exodus video, is that I do not fully intend to debate over legitimacy, and you know, I I don't shy away from debating legitimacy, but for instance, more specifically for the Drupal formation, unless you could give like actual studies that pertain to these things, to the Drupal formation, that show it as an actual full rock structure rather than having been the arc, then maybe I could consider it being more of a rock formation. But considering all evidence surrounding the Drupal formation, I still firmly believe that it is the resting place of the ark.